Hey guys, and welcome back. Today's video I'm going to do like a story time, and I'm going to tell you Kye'S birth story. I'm actually gonna go ahead and film Kane's birth story after this one, but I'm not gonna upload it until the day after I upload this one. Anyway, so I'm going to start from the very beginning and kind of give you the backstory because my husband did miss the birth, Kye'S birth, and I want to, tell you why, and also I'm gonna try to not skip around. Sometimes when I'm telling stories, I tend to get out of order. Like, I'll forget to say something, and then like I'll be on to this whole other part, and I'm like, wait, I forgot to tell you this part. I'm gonna try to stay in order, so just bear with me. But I'm gonna start from the very beginning with Kye. So my husband was currently in the military. He was in the Marines, and we were stationed over in Hawaii at the time, and we had been married maybe a year whenever I found out that I was pregnant with Kye. My pregnancy was going good. I mean, I had morning sickness and things like that, but as far as any complications or anything like that, I was perfectly healthy. He was healthy. But then we got word that my husband was scheduled to be deployed to Afghanistan about the time that Kye was to be born. And I was maybe 4 months along at this time. And so what we decided to do was for me to fly back home to Georgia before I got too far along to fly, because I think it's like 6 or 7 months they cut you off from flying. Like, you can't fly after you're so far along. So we had planned for me to go home and be with my family the remainder of my pregnancy and give birth in Georgia, because if I would have stayed in Hawaii and he deployed, I would have had no one. Like, I had one friend there, but they have lives too, and so she had kids of her own, and I just didn't want to be a burden to anyone. And so that's why we decided for me to come back home to Georgia. And so anyway, and we had actually decided also that because this Afghanistan thing, it was kind of up in the air. They weren't giving us a definite answer, yes or no. We just knew that it was a good possibility. We had went ahead and decided that if he does not get deployed to Afghanistan, he can request leave and fly to Georgia for, a few weeks around the time that Kye is to be born, and he can be with us, he can see the birth, and all that. But the funny thing about that is babies have their own schedule, we found out, and it doesn't always happen the way that you anticipate. And so my pregnancy, the rest of my pregnancy went good, and I had a really good doctor that related to mine and Corey's situation. He was in the Army himself prior to being an OBGYN, and so he kind of knew how those kind of things worked, and was kind of in our shoes a little bit. And my doctor had said, well, if your husband flies to Georgia and you still have not had the baby by 38 weeks, I will go ahead and induce you. So we were like, okay. So the rest of my pregnancy is going good, and we're expecting, if things continue like they are and Corey comes home, then he'll induce me at 38 weeks and it'll all, work out. Well, it actually ended up, it was on a Friday morning, and I was living with my mom at the time, and she was at work, and it was just me and my sister home. And I woke up and I felt, well, first of all, I woke up and my bed was wet and my bottoms were wet, like I had peed myself. But I knew I hadn't peed myself. I haven't peed on myself since, like, I was a little kid. Like, that's just not something that I do. And so this might be TMI, but whenever I went to the bathroom and changed, I, smelled my underwear, and I was like, that that doesn't smell like urine. You know, urine usually has a smell to it, and this had no smell, no nothing. And so my first thought is that my water broke. And so I wasn't sure because it wasn't a whole lot. It was, you know, just enough to damp my bottoms and my bed. And so I was like, okay. Well, I ate some breakfast and I just kind of walked around the house, and I started having like a discomfort in my belly. Like it kind of felt like I needed to go to the bathroom, like I needed to go poop. And so I went and I sat on the toilet forever, you know, trying to use the bathroom. I thought I was just constipated. And so finally I get in the bathtub and I sit there for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, and the pains are starting to get a little bit worse, not bad. They were coming about 6-7 minutes apart, these pains. And so I went ahead and called my mom at work, and I told her what was going on. And she said, well, call the doctor and, you know, tell them what's going on. I called my OBGYN, and I told the nurse that answered the phone. I told her, you know, what I was having, and, you know, of course she tells me to get up to the emergency room or to the maternity ward. And so that's what we do. I had already had my bags packed, and so I told my sister, you know, I think I'm in labor, I'm not sure. And so she gets up, she gets ready, and I went ahead and called my mom back and told her, and she was on her way home to get us and go ahead and let's go up to the hospital. And so we are driving, and they were coming about 4 to 5 minutes apart. And so by the time we get to the hospital, like, my pains are maybe mild to moderate. It's not anything unbearable, but I knew something, you know, wasn't right. And so we get to the hospital, and I walk inside, you know, and I tell the registration desk, you know, that I think I'm in labor, but I'm not sure. And so they, you know, processed me in, and we did the paperwork and all that jazz. So I don't know if I told y'all this, but this all happened at 37 weeks. So they go ahead and they take me back to a room, and they go ahead and check me out. The nurse comes in, she checks me, she does some kind of test on me, and basically she left, and she come back and she says, so you're not in labor, just, you know, come back later if anything changes. But I knew something wasn't right. I knew I was in labor, or I felt like I was anyway. I knew something wasn't right. And so all I could think about was, I cannot go home like this. I can't, you know, I'm gonna have this baby, because the hospital that we were at is a good 45 minutes away, and there's a lot that can happen during labor within 45 minutes. And so thank God my doctor, I guess, was already at the hospital. I'm not sure, but he come in and he checked me, and he was like, yes, she's in labor. And so they went ahead and set me up, got my gown and everything, and it ended up being my mom, my sister, and my mother-in-law in the room with me. You could have 3 people at the time. And so it ended up being them 3. I felt like my mother-in-law was kind of taking the place of Corey not being there, and so it just felt really comforting to have her there as well. They set me up, and my pains are gradually getting worse, you know, and silly me, like, the nurse comes in and she says, let's see, my labor started at 9 a.m. Friday. See, I told y'all I forget to tell you things. My labor had started at 9 o'clock that morning. That's when I woke up, and I felt, you know, wet, and I just kind of felt a little funny. But anyway, so the after they set me up and everything, this is like maybe an hour to 2 hours, the nurse comes in. Like, they had been coming in frequently and asking me, you know, how are you feeling? You know, do you need anything for pain yet? And I'm like, no, I'm fine, you know. Like, I can handle this, like, this is fine. And so, you know, she would leave, and then I actually had another nurse named Penny. I have not forgot this nurse's name. She was so awesome. She'd come in and she would, you know, she would help me through the pains. She would help me to breathe and, you know, just coach me through. And so, let's see, it might have been like 2 o'clock-ish. I'm not sure on my times, but by this time I was in pretty significant pain, maybe 2, 3 o'clock. The nurse had come in and I asked her if I could go ahead and get my epidural. You know, I'm in pretty good pain now, and it's pain that I couldn't really handle anymore, and I should not have waited that long. I should have went ahead and got the epidural the first time they offered, but I didn't. You know, it's my first go around. I didn't know, you know, how bad things could really get. And so the nurse, she said, yes, you can have your epidural, but it's going to be a little while. They had to wait on the anesthesiologist. I want to say they had, at the time, there were several other ladies in the hospital that were, you know, needing epidurals, and so I had to wait in line, basically. And I don't remember how long that took. I just know that whenever I got my epidural, it was already time to push, and he was born at 6:35 p.m. So somewhere between 2 and 3 o'clock and 6:30, I got my epidural. They didn't tell me that I had a button on my bed to press, and it would administer the medication into my body. So I'm sitting there this whole time, like, after I have my epidural, and I'm still in great pain. And so my doctor, he had been coming in often, and I told him, I said, I got my epidural, but I'm still hurting pretty bad. And so he pointed out the button. He's like, did the nurse didn't tell you that you have a button here? And I'm like, no, she didn't. And so he hands it to me, and I just like start pressing like crazy. Like, I've got to get rid of this pain. I mean, it's the kind of pain that, which I'm sure you ladies that have had kids know, but it's the kind of pain that I had back labor with him, and you can't breathe, you can't talk, you can't think. As a matter of fact, whenever a contraction would come with him, I did not want anyone in that room talking. I didn't want any sounds. I wanted silence. And yeah, and so, and also my mom and my mother-in-law had already called Corey during all this time. They had already spoken to him and told him that I was in labor, and so he was on standby over the phone for when Kai was born. The medicine starts kicking in, you know, and the nurse had been coming in, Penny. She come in and she had been kind of helping me along with dilation. I've never known anyone to do this, but she basically would put her whole hand like inside of me and like help like stretch, I guess just to work that canal so that I would not end up having to have like an episiotomy, I think that's what you call it, which I ended up having to have anyway. And so anyway, she had been coming in there and like stretching me out and helping me through, and that hurts pretty bad, by the way, whenever you're having a contraction. But anyway, my epidural it was kicked in, you know, she was still stretching and working and, you know, helping me along. And it was maybe 30 minutes after the epidural had really fully kicked in that a doctor come in and he checked me, and it was time to push. And so I started, they, you know, put my legs up in the stirrups, and Corey's on the phone with my mother-in-law, or either my mom. Somebody had the phone. All I know is my sister had the video camera. She was gonna film it for Corey because, you know, he wasn't there. And so anyway, I start pushing. I want to say maybe I pushed for 30 minutes. I'm not sure. And then he was born, and I remember I was just flooded with emotion. Like, I could not stop crying. He ended up having a cone head because he was in the birth canal for so long. Like, he was super low, like maybe the last 2 weeks that I carried him, like he was just in the birth canal ready. And anyway, whenever he was born, like, I was just flooded with so much emotion, you know, with Corey not being there, and you know, just the overwhelming feeling of having another human being to take care of. So anyway, Corey is on the phone with my mom, or either my mother-in-law, I can't remember, but and they, you know, told him that the baby was born. You know, he could hear him crying, and he was, you know, wanting a picture. And this is so funny, like, they sent a they took a picture of him and they sent it to him, and you know, he was telling us this later, but he was sitting there like anticipating, like, oh, I can't wait to see the baby, you know. And he gets it, and he sees like the cone head, and he's like, oh no. Oh, but little did he know that, you know, most babies are born that way, and it does go away. So, and it did. Like, it was maybe a day or two. His head had, you know, rounded off to this perfect little round shape. We stayed in the hospital, let's see, okay, so the normal stay was 48 hours, but Kye's bilirubin levels were not where they should be, and so he ended up having, which is like jaundice, and so he ended up having to stay one extra night in the little tent that they have, like where they set up the lights. And they had already discharged me, but they moved me to like hotel status where I could stay in the room, but if it got because I did not want to leave my baby there. Like, that was a no, absolute no. And so they were like, well, we'll just put you hotel status, you can stay in the room with the baby, but you know, if we get busy and we need the space, then you'll have to, you know, move out of the room, basically is what they were telling me. But the next day his bilirubin was fine, and so we actually got to come home. So it was about 4 days later that Corey made it home into Georgia to see him, and it was just a really good time. He ended up being there for 2 weeks, and then he had to go back to Hawaii because his leave time was up. And so when Kye was about 4 months old, see, my husband was pretty close to getting out of the military. He had about a year and some change left, and so what we had originally planned was for me and Kye just to stay in Georgia, and he would, you know, come home whenever he got discharged. But whenever Kye was about 4 months old, we really just needed to be together as a family, and so we went ahead and decided that it was best for me and Kye just to go on back to Hawaii and be with Corey until, you know, he was discharged. And so that's what we did, and we lived happily ever after. So that is all for Kye's birth story. I'm about to film Kane's birth story now, but I'm not going to upload it until the day after you're seeing this. So stay tuned for that. And I hope that you guys enjoyed Kye's birth story. Please remember to give it a thumbs up if you did. And I would love to have you subscribe to my channel if you are new. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.